The snow was falling harder now, February 12th, 1999, just past 3 p.m. The kind of storm that turns the world into a white blur and makes you lose all sense of direction. Sarah Mitchell stood at the top of Devil's Run, the double black diamond trail at Frost Hollow Mountain Resort, squinting through her goggles at the wall of white ahead. Visibility was maybe 10 feet, maybe less. She should have headed down an hour ago when the ski patrol started warning people about the conditions. But Sarah had driven 3 hours from Burlington for this. She'd been skiing these trails since she was 12. 24 years old now, she knew every turn, every mogul, every tree line on this mountain. A little storm wasn't going to send her running. That confidence would cost her everything. Sarah adjusted her bright yellow jacket, the one her mother had bought her for Christmas, insisting it would make her easier to spot on the slopes. She pushed off, carving into the first turn. The fresh powder was perfect, light and deep, the kind of conditions Vermont skiers dream about. For a moment, she felt that familiar rush, that sense of flying, of being completely alive. 3 other skiers watched her disappear into the storm from the warming hut at the summit. They'd remember that yellow jacket cutting through the white. They'd remember thinking she was brave, or maybe foolish. They'd remember checking their watches. 3:17 p.m. Sarah Mitchell would never be seen alive again. By 4:45 p.m., the resort was in full emergency mode. The lifts had been shut down due to high winds. Ski Patrol was conducting final sweeps, accounting for every skier. The parking lot was being checked against the list of scanned lift tickets. One car remained unclaimed, a blue Honda Civic with Burlington plates. One skier hadn't checked in at the base lodge. Sarah Mitchell. Mark Russo, head of Ski Patrol for 15 years, coordinated the initial search. He knew Devil's Run intimately. In a storm like this, with visibility near zero and temperatures dropping fast, they had maybe 2 hours before hypothermia became life-threatening. He divided his team into 3 groups. They'd sweep the trail systematically, checking the tree wells where skiers sometimes fell and got trapped, the off-piste areas where someone might have accidentally ventured, the steep drops where a fall could be catastrophic. The radio crackled with updates. Nothing on the upper section, nothing in the glades, nothing near the trail markers. As darkness fell, they switched to headlamps and searchlights. The storm was getting worse. Wind gusts were approaching 50 miles per hour. The temperature had dropped to -10. Mark made the call he hated making. They had to suspend the search until morning. It was too dangerous for his team. Sarah's roommate, Jennifer Chen, had started worrying around 6 p.m. Sarah was supposed to be back for their Friday night tradition, pizza, and bad movies. When she didn't show, Jennifer called Sarah's cell, straight to voicemail. She called the resort. That's when she learned about the missing skier in the yellow jacket. Jennifer's hands shook as she gave them Sarah's description. 5'6", athletic build, brown hair. She'd been wearing that yellow Columbia jacket, black ski pants, a purple helmet. Sarah's parents, David and Margaret Mitchell, drove through the blizzard from their home in Middlebury, arriving at the resort just after midnight. They sat in the ski patrol office, clutching cups of coffee they couldn't drink, staring at the trail map where Mark had marked the search areas. Margaret kept saying the same thing over and over. She's an expert skier. She knows these trails. She knows what to do. David said nothing, just held his wife's hand and watched the snow continue to fall. At first light on February 13th, the search resumed. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind 3 feet of fresh snow and a crystalline, clear morning. The mountain looked beautiful, deceptively peaceful. 30 volunteers had joined the search. Local skiers, emergency responders, people who'd heard about the missing young woman on the morning news. They found Sarah's skis first. One was at the tree line, about halfway down Devil's Run, 200 yards off the main trail. It looked like she'd hit something, a rock or a stump hidden under the snow, and been thrown from her bindings. The other ski was 20 feet away, buried under a drift. But there was no sign of Sarah. The search expanded. Vermont State Police joined the effort. A helicopter circled overhead, its thermal imaging camera searching for heat signatures. Dog teams worked the woods beyond the ski area boundary. Every tree well was probed. Every gully was checked. Nothing. As the day wore on, hope began to fade. In those temperatures, without shelter, survival beyond 24 hours was unlikely. The search zone kept expanding. Maybe she'd walked, disoriented, trying to find help. Maybe she'd sought shelter somewhere unexpected. They searched abandoned warming huts, maintenance sheds, any structure that might offer protection from the cold. Jennifer had made flyers with Sarah's picture, a photo from the previous summer. Sarah laughing at a backyard barbecue, her face sun-kissed and alive. Volunteers posted them at every gas station, store, and restaurant within 50 miles. Missing skier in bold letters above that smiling face. The local news picked up the story. Sarah Mitchell, 24, accomplished skier, University of Vermont graduate, missing on Frost Hollow Mountain. Days turned into a week. The search area had expanded to cover the entire mountain and beyond. They'd used ground-penetrating radar to search beneath snowdrifts. They'd brought in avalanche dogs trained to detect human scent beneath meters of snow. The Mitchell family had offered a $25,000 reward for information. Tips came in. Someone thought they'd seen a woman matching Sarah's description at a truck stop. Another claimed to have seen her hitchhiking. But they all led nowhere. On February 20th, 8 days after Sarah disappeared, Mark Russo made the heartbreaking recommendation to scale back the search. They'd covered every inch of searchable terrain multiple times. The chances of survival were zero. The chances of finding her before spring snow melt were slim. Resources were needed elsewhere, other emergencies, other searches. The Mitchell family refused to give up. They hired a private search team. They consulted with survival experts. They clung to miracle stories. People surviving weeks in snow caves, skiers found alive against all odds. But as February turned to March, even they had to accept what everyone else already knew. Sarah was gone. If this story grips you the way it gripped me when I first discovered it, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. We're diving deep into one of Vermont's most perplexing cold cases, and you won't want to miss how this finally got solved after 25 years. Before we go any further, I want to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city, state, or country in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories reach, and knowing there's a community of true crime fans from all corners of the world invested in getting justice for victims like Sarah. Vermont in 1999 was a different world. No smartphones, no GPS tracking, no social media to spread information instantly. When someone disappeared on a mountain, the search was analog. boots on the ground, eyes scanning the horizon, voices calling out against the wind. Frost Hollow Mountain Resort was a Vermont institution. Not as big as Killington or Stowe, but beloved by locals for exactly that reason. It was the kind of place where lift operators knew your name, where families had been skiing the same trails for generations, where the lodge still served the same chili recipe they'd been making since 1962. The mountain had its legends. Devil's Run, where Sarah disappeared, was named after an incident in 1923 when a local minister then claimed he'd seen the devil himself standing at the trailhead during a particularly violent storm. Rational folks knew it was probably just shadows and snow, but the name stuck. The trail had claimed its share of injuries over the years: broken bones, torn ligaments, the occasional serious head injury, but never a death, never a disappearance. Sarah Mitchell embodied everything Vermont prided itself on. She was outdoorsy, independent, environmentally conscious. She worked at a non-profit in Burlington that promoted sustainable agriculture. She volunteered at the local food bank. She was the kind of person who stopped to help strangers change flat tires, who remembered birthdays, who brought homemade cookies to the office. She'd grown up in Middlebury, in a Victorian house on Weybridge Street with a view of the mountains. Her father taught history at Middlebury College. Her mother was a nurse at Porter Hospital. Sarah and her younger brother Tom had learned to ski at Frost Hollow when they were barely old enough to walk. The Mitchell family had a season pass tradition, going back 15 years. Sarah was good at everything she tried, but skiing was where she excelled. She'd raced in high school, nothing too serious, but enough to develop real technique. In college at UVM, she'd been part of the ski club, spending weekends exploring every mountain in Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. She knew how to read terrain, how to navigate in flat light, how to self-arrest if she fell. She carried avalanche beacons, even though Vermont's avalanche risk was minimal. She was prepared. She was careful, which made her disappearance even more baffling. The initial investigation was thorough, but limited by technology and assumptions. Vermont State Police treated it as a skiing accident. Tragic, but not criminal. Detective Robert Hayes led the investigation. He interviewed everyone who'd been on the mountain that day. The 3 skiers who'd seen Sarah at the summit all told the same story. She'd been alone. She'd seemed confident, happy even. One remembered her saying something about one last run before the storm got too bad. The lift operators remembered her too. She'd been a regular Friday skier, often coming alone when she could leave work early. Friendly, but focused. Never caused problems. Always followed the rules, except that day when she'd ignored the warnings about the weather. They examined her car. Nothing unusual. Extra clothes, granola bars, water bottles, jumper cables. The typical Vermont winter survival kit. Her apartment revealed nothing concerning. No signs of depression or distress. No troubled relationships. No financial problems. By all accounts, Sarah Mitchell had been living a good life that she had no reason to abandon. The working theory was straightforward. Sarah had hit something on Devil's Run, been thrown from her skis, and either injured herself in the fall or become disoriented in the storm. She'd likely wandered off trail, perhaps following what she thought was the right direction, and succumbed to the elements. Her body was somewhere on that mountain, buried under snow, waiting to be discovered during the spring thaw. But spring came, and the snow melted, and Sarah's body wasn't there. They searched again once the ground was clear. Every ravine, every cliff base, every place a body might have been concealed by winter snow. They brought in cadaver dogs. They used metal detectors to search for ski poles, bindings, any equipment that might lead them to her. Nothing. Summer searches expanded the radius. Maybe animals had scattered the remains. Maybe she'd made it further than anyone thought possible. Hikers were given flyers, asked to watch for anything unusual. Hunters that fall were briefed about the missing skier. Years passed. Nothing. The case went cold, but it never went away. Every few years, someone would claim to have information. A psychic would say they'd had a vision. A hiker would find a piece of fabric and wonder if it was connected. Each lead was investigated. Each one led nowhere. Sarah's parents aged a decade in the first year. They kept her room exactly as she'd left it. UVM pennant on the wall. Ski magazines on the nightstand. Laundry basket with clothes she'd never wash. They started a foundation in her name, providing ski equipment to underprivileged kids. It was something, a way to make her absence mean something. Her brother Tom stopped skiing altogether. Couldn't stand being on a mountain without thinking of her. He moved to California, as far from Vermont winters as he could get. But every February 12th, he'd call his parents, and they'd not talk about what they were all thinking about. Jennifer, the roommate, held on to the apartment for 3 years, paying Sarah's half of the rent, unable to let go. She'd leave the porch light on every night, just in case. Finally, her therapist convinced her that Sarah wouldn't want her to live like that. She moved, but she kept that photo, Sarah laughing at the barbecue, on her dresser for the next 25 years. The Burlington nonprofit where Sarah worked planted a tree in her memory. Every spring, it bloomed with white flowers that looked like snow. Colleagues would stand beneath it sometimes, remembering her laugh, her terrible coffee addiction, the way she'd hum while she worked. But memory fades. New skiers came to Frost Hollow who'd never heard of Sarah Mitchell. Devil's Run was just another double black diamond, challenging but not haunted. The resort updated its lifts, expanded its terrain, moved forward. Only the old-timers remembered the winter of '99, the search, the woman in the yellow jacket who vanished into the storm. What does justice look like after 25 years? We're about to find out, but first, if you're as invested in this story as I am, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever been caught in conditions where you feared for your safety? I genuinely want to hear your experiences. Also, what time is it where you are right now? Are you watching this late at night, like I was when I first started researching Sarah's case? Drop the time in the comments. I'm always curious who else loses sleep over these stories. In 2015, something interesting happened. A new detective joined the Vermont State Police Cold Case Unit. Her name was Amanda Foster, and she had a reputation for looking at old cases with fresh eyes. She'd grown up in Vermont, actually learned to ski at Frost Hollow. She remembered being 9 years old when Sarah Mitchell disappeared, remembered her parents talking about it in hushed tones, remembered the fear that gripped the skiing community that winter. Detective Foster pulled Sarah's file in 2016. 17 years cold. Dozens of boxes of evidence, interviews, search reports. She started from the beginning, rereading every witness statement, re-examining every photograph. Something bothered her about the case, something she couldn't quite articulate. The conventional wisdom had always been that Sarah died on the mountain. But what if she didn't? What if the skis were staged? What if Sarah never made that final run at all? Foster started re-interviewing witnesses. Most had moved on, their memories faded, but she tracked down one of the 3 skiers who'd seen Sarah at the summit. His name was Brian Keefe, now living in Boston. When Foster asked him to go through that day again, he mentioned something that wasn't in the original report. He thought he'd seen someone else near the summit warming hut, someone in ski patrol gear, who wasn't actually ski patrol. At the time, he hadn't thought much of it. The mountain was full of people in various uniforms. But looking back, it seemed odd. This was the first thread. Foster pulled it. She went through employment records from 1999. Who had access to ski patrol uniforms? Who knew the mountain well enough to navigate it in a blizzard? Who might have had reason to harm Sarah Mitchell? The list was long. Frost Hollow employed dozens of people, and uniforms weren't exactly under lock and key. But Foster was patient. She cross-referenced employees with criminal records, with complaints, with anyone who'd left under suspicious circumstances. One name caught her attention: Daniel Frost. No relation to the mountain's name, just an unfortunate coincidence. He'd worked maintenance at Frost Hollow from 1997 to 1999. He'd been let go in March 1999, just weeks after Sarah's disappearance. The official reason was reduction in workforce, but Foster dug deeper. She found 2 female employees who'd filed complaints about Frost making them uncomfortable. Nothing actionable, just creepy behavior, unwanted attention, showing up where he shouldn't be. Both complaints had been filed in January 1999, weeks before Sarah disappeared. Daniel Frost had moved to New Hampshire after leaving Frost Hollow, then Massachusetts, then Maine, never staying anywhere long. Foster tracked his employment history: a string of maintenance jobs at various ski resorts, each lasting a year or 2 before he moved on. No criminal record, but a pattern of complaints that never quite rose to the level of charges. In 2018, Foster got a break. A woman in Maine contacted police about a man who'd been stalking her at Sunday River Ski Resort. The man was Daniel Frost, now 52, still working maintenance, still making women uncomfortable. This time, the woman had evidence: photos he'd taken of her without permission, disturbing letters he'd left on her car. Foster drove to Maine. She interviewed the woman, reviewed the evidence. The photos were particularly disturbing, taken from hidden vantage points, focusing on women who looked remarkably similar. Athletic build, brown hair, mid-20s. They looked like Sarah Mitchell. But disturbing, behavior didn't prove murder. Foster needed more. She obtained a warrant to search Frost's apartment. It was a small, cluttered space that smelled of cigarettes and old takeout. Nothing immediately incriminating. But in a closet, behind boxes of old ski equipment, Foster found something that made her blood run cold. A yellow Columbia ski jacket, women's medium, style from the late 1990s. It wasn't proof it was Sarah's jacket. Columbia made thousands of those jackets. But it was enough to bring Frost in for questioning. The interview lasted 8 hours. Frost denied everything. He didn't remember Sarah Mitchell. He'd never hurt anyone. The jacket was his ex-girlfriend's. He couldn't explain why he'd kept it for 20 years. He couldn't explain why he'd left Frost Hollow so suddenly in 1999. His story kept changing. Small details that didn't add up. Foster needed more. She needed forensic evidence. By 2019, DNA technology had advanced far beyond what was available in 1999. Foster had the yellow jacket tested. They found hair, brown, consistent with Sarah's. But after 20 years, getting a definitive DNA match was challenging. The hair was degraded. The results were inconclusive. Foster wasn't giving up. She went back to the original evidence: Sarah's skis, stored in a Vermont State Police warehouse for 2 decades. They'd been tested for fingerprints in 1999, but the technology had been limited. Now, new techniques could potentially lift prints from surfaces previously considered impossible. It took months, but forensic technicians found something: a partial thumbprint on the binding release mechanism. Someone had manually released Sarah's bindings. The print didn't match Sarah's. Foster obtained a warrant for Frost's fingerprints. The comparison took weeks. Computer analysis, expert review, verification, and re-verification. The match came back positive. In March 2024, 25 years after Sarah Mitchell disappeared, Daniel Frost was arrested for her murder. The arrest sent shockwaves through Vermont. People who'd assumed Sarah died in a skiing accident were forced to confront a darker truth. Someone had killed her. Someone had staged the scene to look like an accident. Someone had been living free for a quarter century, while the Mitchell family suffered. Daniel Frost was 57 now, gray-haired, ordinary-looking. He'd spent 25 years moving from resort to resort, watching women, taking photos, living his life while Sarah's family mourned. Neighbors in his main apartment complex described him as quiet, kept to himself, sometimes saw him loading ski equipment into his car, even though he never seemed to actually ski. As news of the arrest spread, other women came forward. A lift operator from Stowe, who'd felt stalked in 2003. A ski instructor from Loon Mountain, who'd received anonymous letters in 2007. A college student from Sugarloaf, who'd been followed in 2012. All described similar patterns. All had reported it. None had been taken seriously enough. The investigation revealed Frost's obsession went back years before Sarah. He'd grown up in Vermont, learned to ski as a child, but a knee injury in high school ended his skiing career. He'd taken the maintenance job at Frost Hollow to stay close to the sport, but somewhere along the way, proximity had turned into something darker. Prosecutors theorized that Frost had been watching Sarah for weeks before that February day. He knew her routine: Friday afternoon skiing, always alone, always the same trails. He'd planned it, waited for the perfect opportunity. The storm provided cover. He'd intercepted her somewhere between the summit and where her skis were found, maybe offering help, maybe using his maintenance uniform to appear official. What exactly happened next? Only Frost knew. But investigators believed he'd killed her elsewhere on the mountain, then staged the skis to make it look like an accident. He'd had all night during the storm to hide her body somewhere it would never be found, using his intimate knowledge of the mountain's maintenance areas, old equipment sheds, places no one would think to look. The Mitchell family's reaction was devastating to witness. David Mitchell, now 78, had spent 25 years wondering if he could have done something different, if he should have insisted Sarah not ski alone. Margaret, 76, had kept Sarah's room exactly as it was, a shrine to a daughter who was never coming home. When they learned about the arrest, they didn't feel relief or closure. They felt rage, pure, justified rage that someone had stolen their daughter and then watched them suffer for decades. Tom Mitchell flew in from California. He was 45 now, older than Sarah ever got to be. He stood in the courthouse and stared at Daniel Frost, trying to understand how someone could do this, how someone could destroy a family, and then just live. Just go to work and eat meals and sleep in a warm bed while Sarah was somewhere cold and alone. Jennifer Chen, Sarah's former roommate, now lived in Portland with her own family. She'd named her daughter Sarah. When she heard about the arrest, she broke down crying in her kitchen while her teenage daughter held her, finally understanding why her mother had always been so protective, so fearful when she went skiing. The ski community reeled. How many times had Frost been on the same mountain as other skiers? How many close calls had there been? How many women had felt uncomfortable around him but dismissed their instincts? The what-ifs were torture. So here we are, 25 years later. Daniel Frost is charged with murder, though Sarah's body has never been found. The trial is set to begin this fall. Prosecutors believe they have enough evidence: the staged skis, the fingerprint, the pattern of stalking, the jacket kept as a trophy. The defense will argue it's all circumstantial, that there's no body, no direct evidence of murder. But for those who loved Sarah, the arrest itself is something. Not closure. There can never be closure without Sarah coming home. But acknowledgement. Validation that their loss wasn't just a tragic accident. Someone was responsible. Someone made a choice that destroyed multiple lives. And finally, that someone will face consequences. Sarah Mitchell was more than how she died. She was a woman who loved mountains and snow, and the feeling of flying down a steep trail. She was someone who brought cookies to the office, and helped strangers, and believed in making the world better. She had plans to travel to Switzerland, to ski the Alps, to start a community garden in Burlington, to maybe get married and have kids who'd learned to ski at Frost Hollow just like she had. All of that was stolen on February 12th, 1999. But what wasn't stolen was the impact Sarah had in her 24 years. The nonprofit she worked for created a scholarship in her name that has sent dozens of young people to environmental programs. The Mitchell Family Foundation has provided ski equipment to hundreds of kids who wouldn't otherwise have access to the sport Sarah loved. Her story has prompted reforms in how ski resorts handle missing person reports and suspicious behavior by employees. If Sarah's story moved you, please share this video. Her name deserves to be known. Her life deserves to be remembered. Subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into cases that changed everything. Cases that remind us why we can never stop fighting for justice. Before you go, leave a comment telling me what case you want me to cover next. Your engagement matters. It keeps these stories alive. It ensures victims like Sarah are never forgotten. Sarah Mitchell was born in 1974. She disappeared in 1999. She was 24 years old. In that brief life, she brought joy to everyone who knew her. She conquered mountains. She fought for causes she believed in. She lived fully and freely until someone decided she didn't deserve to anymore. For 25 years, her killer walked free. For 25 years, her family waited for answers. For 25 years, it seemed like justice would never come. But it did. Not quickly, not easily, but it came. The arrest of Daniel Frost proves something important. Cold cases are never hopeless. Detectives persist. Technology advances. Evidence waits. And sometimes, just sometimes, the truth refuses to stay buried. There are families across the world still waiting for their own answers. still hoping that someday they'll get the call that changes everything. Sarah's story tells them, keep hoping, keep pushing, keep demanding justice, because it's possible. Sarah Mitchell lived. She mattered. She conquered mountains and loved fiercely and dreamed big dreams. And now, finally, her story has a chance at an ending. The trial begins this fall. Whatever happens in that courtroom, Sarah's family will be there. Her friends will be there. The community that searched for her, that mourned her, that never forgot her, they'll all be there. Because Sarah deserves that. She deserves to have her story told in full. She deserves to have her death acknowledged as murder, not accident. She deserves justice, even if it comes 25 years late. And somewhere, if there's any grace in this universe, Sarah knows. Knows she wasn't forgotten. Knows someone finally stood up and said, "This was wrong. This was evil. This matters. Rest in peace, Sarah Mitchell. You're not forgotten. You never will be. The mountain remembers you. The snow remembers you. And we remember you. Forever 24. Forever missed. Finally, maybe, at peace."